Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the President and CEO of the Craft and Hobby Association. He goes by one name, Andre.
Good morning, everybody. The way I'm introduced is not because I'm a star, it's because nobody could pronounce my last name. Just a little background, it's Shechtman for the record, and if you're wondering, I'm Irish. My parents, when they emigrated from Ireland, they decided to shorten our name, so they took the O and the apostrophe away. But good morning and welcome to the 2015 Mega Show. I hope everybody had a great evening last night at the block party. I saw a lot of people dancing out there. We had a wonderful full day of education yesterday. I hope you got a chance to take some seminars and workshops, and education continues throughout the show, on the show floor, so I hope you take advantage of that. I'd be remiss if I didn't thank our sponsors, Michaels, for the block party last night and for today's keynote session. Thank you for your support. We have a little bit of a change of format than years prior. Normally we would do the annual business meeting here in the morning. Please join us this afternoon. It will be at 5:30 in room 204 A and B. We'll have a town hall portion there. You can hear about what we've done in 2014, what we're going to be doing in 2015, and it'll really be a chance for us to kind of interact and hear what your concerns and needs are so we could think about that as we develop programs going forward. We also have tomorrow evening a celebration of the industry at our foundation gala. We're going to be showcasing our CHA Service Award winners. We will have our exhibitor awards. So today, for all the exhibiting community, we have our judges walking the show floor to look at winners in 4 different categories for Peninsula and Island, Linear Booth, New Exhibitor, and a Critic's Choice. We'll be celebrating those awards at the gala as well. We will have our Hot Products Award winners announced. So if you had an opportunity last night to be at the VIP media event for that, you see all the nominees that were in the room. We will be announcing the winners tomorrow at the gala. And we will be inducting our 2015 class of Hall of Fame inductees. So please join us. If you have more information, come down to the registration desk. There's a few seats left. It is at capacity at this point. With that, I want to introduce our keynote speaker today. Rachel Shechtman is a 4th-generation entrepreneur who loves finding the next big thing as much as sharing it with others. In 2003, Rachel launched Cube Ventures, a retail and marketing consultancy whose clients include Lincoln, Tom's, Kraft Foods, Gilt, Gap, and AOL. In December 2011, she launched Story, a 2,000-square-foot retail concept in Chelsea, New York. Story received Fashion Groups International's 2014 Rising Star Award for Best Retail Concept and recently was number 4 in Time Out's Top 15 New York Shops list. Story's new model has generated extensive press, and Rachel was named one of Fast Company's 100 most creative people in business and Fortune magazine's 40 Under 40. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Rachel Shechtman.
So I'm especially excited to be here because, I've given a bunch of talks over the course of the past 3 years, having launched Story, and I've never been in a room with so many creative people, so I'm with my people, so anyways, I'm psyched to be here, so thank you for having me. Okay, so I will tell you my story and why I'm here. That's me. Okay, so when I was 7, I'm a 4th-generation retailer. And my mom took me when I was 12 years old to, of all places, the Jacob Javits Center to go to the New York Gift Show. And I was there, of course, because I was buying my bat mitzvah favors wholesale. And I was walking with her throughout the trade show, and I saw all of these products and all of these things. And after aisles and aisles of stuff, I looked at her and I said, "You can shop for a living?" So it was then I knew what I was going to do when I was going to grow up. I had no idea it would take this crazy form. So I'm here to tell you today how that all happened. So fast forward a couple years, I moved to New York. became an accidental retail consultant, worked on a startup I never started. And, you know, I'd always pass for rent signs and spaces and knew at some point I had to do a store to get it out of my system. So that day was November 1st, 2011. And it's a 2,000 square foot space in Chelsea and Manhattan. And it's a space that has the point of view of a magazine. We reinvent it entirely every 4 to 8 weeks like a gallery, and we sell things like a store. And it was an interesting thing, right? Because we're not a pop-up store. I don't like that word when it's talked about with story, because what we're doing is so entirely different. And so I signed a 10-year lease, and it's kind of like, well, how are we going to build a brand that's always changing but constant? And so an amazing creative advisor said, well, let's just call it Story. And so we called it Story. But how can I tell you when we're changing our design and changing the story that we're telling? And so they took the O in Story and made it parentheses. So we did wellness story, making things story, home for the holiday story, and all in all right now we're on our 21st story in 3 years. So what I really talk about a lot is looking at things differently. And so what Story is all about is a concept called retail media that I stumbled upon. And you're probably thinking, well, what is she talking about? So we're used to seeing media in the form of magazines, and this is the cover of InStyle's color issue, and that's the cover of our color issue. And when you open up a magazine, you see editorial content in the form of magazine articles and pictures and whatnot. And then there's those things called advertisers. And so I thought, well, why can't we do that in the store? And so our version of editorial is curating merchandise around a subject matter, and then having events that amplify and bring it to life. And then our version of advertising is sponsorship. So you open up a magazine, you see editorial, you see an ad, you walk into Story, and you have editorial and you have an ad. And what's interesting about that to me is it's not like Taco Bell's logo on Color Story. It's a brand that adds relevancy, authenticity, and expertise to a dialogue. And frankly, Benjamin Moore knows a lot more about color than I do. And it gives them an opportunity to access a consumer in a contextually relevant dialogue, but that's new for their brand. And it also gives me an additional revenue stream that enables me to do something crazy like change a store every 4 to 8 weeks. And so the entire store is painted like a spectrum of colors, and then we place merchandise depending on their color throughout the store. We did his story. It was curated merchandise that was either for men, companies owned and run by different gentlemen. We partnered with a small company called Procter & Gamble, and we took some of their male grooming brands, Braun and Old Spice, and we had a hot towel shave station, because why wouldn't you do that in a retail store? And so you could come into the store and get a hot towel shave. And then we also partnered with Details magazine, and what you can see next to those products, I don't know if you can see them, but those are 3D printed seals, right? So if you open up a magazine and it's their best of issue with their awards for products, it was our way of doing that in store, and instead of cutting out a piece of paper, you know, we did some laser cutting and 3D printing of those. Adding technology into the experience is something that I think a lot about. But to me, it's like, if you're going to add technology to an experience, have it give you something that I cannot get on my couch. There's nothing that makes me more crazy than walking into a store and there's a bunch of computers and iPads where I'm like, oh cool, I can go on their website, but I can also do that on my couch. And so this is an amazing technology called Perch Interactive. And what it does is it projects on a surface. It makes any surface dynamic when you touch it, but also brings physical and digital together. So this was during his story, and that table was like a shadow box filled with samples, and then we had products on top that are like our living advertorial, and so you could play videos and look at different things. But what was super fun is you could go diving for samples, and there was a CVS 4 blocks away, and we're talking about soaps and razors, so the retails here were way under $20. And people would spend anywhere from 12 to, I think, 19 or 20 minutes officially digging for samples because there were only a very few razors in there. But the idea, again, of giving an experience and giving entertainment and engagement is a really great way to have deep impact. And I always joke and say, at the end of the day, we're really just a dating service between brands and consumers. and it's finding technologies and stories to kind of play matchmaker. This was our Made in America story, and I don't know if Ed's in the room from Stencil One, but I was honored and excited that we had his products during that one. And when you walk into the store, it really is like a living magazine. There's a letter from the editor that tells you about the issue. As you can tell, the creative changes. This was a road trip across America. We do what I call bios for each brand, maker, designer, and it tells their story in a way that makes sense. So for here, these were postcards from the different makers and designers, and for Love Story, we had love letters. And it's really a way to democratize access to information, which I'll talk about in a little while. And then it's adjacent to their product. So you really kind of, it's a multi-sensory experience. Someone once told me, you know, the way certain well-known folks like Oprah and Bill Clinton are able to reach as many as they do with their messages, it's a multi-sensory communication. So some people are visual and some people are auditory, and so by kind of having written words next to product, it gives an opportunity to really reach more people. This was a different iteration of our perch technology featuring products on the table. So this was the last story that we just closed, and it's a fun story. So this is Brian Cornell, and I was in the store right before the opening of our style and technology store. And I was in there getting ready with the team. I wasn't planning on working with customers, and I say that because I was in sweatpants and really probably not just appropriately to be speaking to customers. And so, you know, I always like lingering to see, you know, how people interact in the store, because usually within 1 hour, we can get a sense of what products, you know, what the experience will be like for the duration of the story. So about 10% of the people who come to Story are other businesses who look at us for thought leadership. And so it's been everyone from, you know, Nike to Dress Barn to L'Occitane to almost every major retailer out there. So a group of folks get out of an SUV, and I said to my team, just go find out who they are. I mean, you could tell it was a little corporate field trip, and they said it's Target, and I said, oh, cool, and I've always loved Target. And their trend group comes to every story, so that's great. And so I just walk up to one gentleman, which was this gentleman, and I said, hey, I'm Rachel, I just want to say hi, I'm the founder of Story. And he goes, hi, I'm Brian. And I said, oh, well, you know, where are you at Target? We know a bunch of people on your team. And he goes, in Minneapolis. And I said, great, well, what do you do there? And he goes, we're part of the executive group. And I said, okay. And there were a bunch of different people in the store from his team. I didn't know who he was. And I said, well, you know, excuse my appearance. I didn't think I would be meeting anyone today. But I just wanted to say welcome. And, you know, ever since I launched Story, the brand that comes up more than anything is Target. And everyone always says, when are you going to do something with Target? When are you going to do something with Target? And I've always said, you know, it's been my dream, and I'll do something with Target when I've done enough stories to know what I'm doing, and when Target will do something they've never done before. So he pulls out his business card, and he gives it to me, and he goes, well, if you ever have an idea, which I know you can all relate to, because ideas are what fuels what we all do, is drop me a note and send me your idea. And I look down, and it says, Brian Cornell, Chairman and CEO of Target Corporation. So I think the moral of that story is wear sweatpants to work, because I guess they're good luck. But it was such a great testament to being in the right place in the right time. But the other reason why I share it is because it was on September 8th that conversation happened. And before he left the store, I said to him, I'd like to give you a homework assignment. And I said, you know, because I've always wanted to work with Target, I don't need to wait to send you my idea, because I've got about 100, but I'll just tell you one for now. And that is, we open up our biggest story of the year in 8 weeks. And it's Home for the Holidays, and it's a living gift guide, and we design the store like a home. And I think it'd be really cool if you let me go shop Target to find my favorite things, and then actually sell Target product at Story next to 160 independent brands. And so he said, well, do you think you have time for a call next week? And then, you know, I think I do. And so on November 8th, 8 weeks later, we opened up Home for the Holidays with Target as our partner. And what was so cool is, right, you know, there's perception and reality, and there's big stores and big brands. But here's a company where typically something like this would take 12 to 18 months of planning. And in 8 weeks, we were able to bring together over 20 proprietary target brands and really integrate them in the conversation adjacent to small batch product, and it was really an amazing experience. And then we debuted the new Perch technology, and this is their interactive shelf. So you go to pull one of those products off the shelf, and it will give you content, digital content in the form of pictures or videos. So one thing that I think a lot about is, we're the same people who live online who live offline, right? And there's been 20 years of incessant digital and technological innovation. And yet we hear over and over and over again, retail's dead, it's dying, stores are closing, but we're still defining traditional retail the same way. But if you have, new business models online, whether it's subscriptions in the form of Birchbox or all these other platforms, and we're still saying sales per square foot, banging our heads against a wall, then of course it's going to be broken. So how can we take what works online and translate it in a way that's relevant offline? And so for us, one of the things I think about often is experience per square foot. And so what I mean by that is, in certain cases, not every inch of square footage is used to sell product. So for example, this was our Making Things story. Another small startup we partnered with was General Electric. But they know more about, operating CNC mills and injection molding machines to build jet engines and make other products. And so 75% of that space was used to make stuff. We weren't selling the products. No one had to pay. There was a small area where you could buy stuff, but the majority of it was that, right? And they were paying for that space, so I still made money. And to be honest, given the time of year and the time period we had this store open, my productivity was 5x would it have been otherwise selling product. We had 9 maker bots. I happened to be standing in the store when this moment happened. There's a lot of debate right now in fashion magazines about having to qualify when there's airbrushing. And I always say there should be like a qualifier here. This hasn't been enhanced to show happiness or surprise and delight. But this was a young girl's reaction. And so, people often say, well, who's your market and who's your demographic? And I say it's really, really narrow. It's men, women, and kids between 6 and 80. And it sounds funny, but it is. But I also think that, like, if you're telling a good story and you're reverse engineering the experience, it can self-select for those different conversations. And it's going to be a different experience. But as long as someone walks out of that store having experienced a story, then to us, we're doing a good job. And so with Making Things story, right, like, what does a 6-year-old have to do with a CNC mill or a laser cutter? So we did, the internal name I'd call this was Pimp Your Pumpkin, like that show on MTV, Pimp Your Ride. So we laser cut Mr. Potato Head pieces, of course, and kids got to make their own pumpkins. And we got ladies very excited about machines by, this is Rebecca Minkoff, because if you want to get women excited, handbags usually do that. And so we did a social media competition, and if you showed up, you could win a one-of-a-kind laser-etched handbag. So what a lot of this has kind of taught me was this idea of how do we take, again, online, offline, and what is it that resonates? And so this idea of democratizing discovery and access is what I'm going to spend the rest of the time talking about, and it's what, I have lots of Rachel theories, and so really what this store and story is all about is a lab for every year, us as a team and personally to explore some of those theories and ideas. And so, everyone's familiar with Kickstarter, right? Over $1 billion given to Kickstarter projects. Etsy, they're now, I think, at almost 1 billion shops on Etsy. Everyone know Quirky? Submit ideas for a product and they make them. They do eval. Now you have bigger brands, kind of wanting to talk about discovery and people doing events like anthropology with pot planting. And so how do we take that idea of democratizing access and discovery online in a physical world? And so during our Making Things story, we had already been in business a year. And what was happening is I was getting submitted so many products, and I didn't have time to see them all. And to be frank, right, since 12 years old, that's my favorite part of the job, is seeing stuff and meeting the people behind it. And so I thought, okay, if you're a brand, if you're a designer, what do you want? You want sales and you want press. So let's just have a night, invite people to come, they can pitch their product, and I'll invite, a friend in a media company. And so we invited the editors of Cool Hunting. And if you don't know Cool Hunting, I'd highly recommend it because they've been around for years and are always discovering great things. And so we just responded to everyone who emailed us. People could show up and tell their story and pitch us products. And there were no parameters around it other than you had to have a ready-made product that could be sold in the store, right? So it wasn't an idea or a prototype. And really, that was it. And so the response was amazing. It's now actually become, it's something we do about on average once every 8 weeks. And it's products from jewelry to home goods. It's all different age ranges. And it's really, I'd say, the number one thing that really gets me excited and inspired. So this is pitch night. Pitch night is a part of every story that we do, which is an open call to meet new designers and talent like yourself.
I'm Susan Tang, founder of Behold. Our mission is to create innovative products through 3D printing.
I make pillows from restored burlap shipping bags.
I think that these are rad.
These are hand sculpted, baked. I make the noses.
I think it's under $100 though.
They're hand cut and individually assembled.
It's black walnut and brass.
Those are great.
We have some belts to show you guys.
Nice. Probably like $100. That's our ideal price point.
It's a doorstop and buttons. They retail for $30.
My price point ranges from $100 to many thousands of dollars.
I'm wholesaling these for $25.
I want to sell these for holiday. Yes, you can, absolutely can. Let's be a little lab. We'll put them in here. We'll come up with a price that you think is reasonable, and let's see.
I would say that story was very influential on giving me an insight on how to create the products.
I came for pitch night and I pitched my product and she just fell in love with it and she's just been kind of my champion ever since.
Since being sold in Story, other stores have noticed my products and I'm being sold around the world now.
That's pitch night. So the gentleman who did Arthur Randall, who did the doorstop, that was a bookend, Scotty. So a fun fact about that. So he came into our Making Things story, and he's a neighbor, and he came in a few weeks later, and I had never met him before, and he asked to meet me, and he said, can I show you something? And I said, yeah. And he said, I came into your Making Things story, and I had never seen a 3D printer before. I didn't know what it was. And I'm a graphic designer, and it was the first time I ever thought of my design as three-dimensional. And so I had an idea for a product, and I went and I made a prototype. And so I just wanted to show it to you and get your feedback, and if maybe by chance, would you ever be open to selling it? And he showed it to me, and I kind of got chills. The product was great, but it wasn't because of the product. And I said, oh my God, we inspired you? And he goes, no, you enabled me. And it was just so powerful to me, right? Because it's someone I didn't know who walked in off the street, and what enabled me to do that was General Electric. So now you talk about this multi-billion-dollar behemoth company, right? And now he moved back to London, and he's not doing graphic design, he's doing product design. And that to me is what I really think we should be thinking about, is how we can look at it taking these moments in human interactions and empowering and enabling people. Another story is Beth Mockery. So Beth is a jewelry designer. She wasn't a jewelry designer as her primary job when we met her. She was a structural engineer, and she had this idea for a necklace. I'm wearing it, but and what's really, you're like, okay, it's pretty maybe, but that's what it does, so it's a hidden message. I always love that. And she had never sold a product before, and I freaked out. I have a 10-second rule. It's a good product, you got 10 seconds, you're banned. And and so I like freaked out. I'm like, oh my God, we have to sell it, we have to sell it. And so we put it in the store and people loved it, and you know, you can make your own message, and then that woman came in and bought one. Her name's Whoopi Goldberg. So she put her on air, and now Beth Mockery's hobby is her full-time job. So this year we did a pitch night for our holiday story. And Cool Hunting now comes back. You know, we have different people on the panel for pitch night. So we did one around finding socially conscious brands, and we had Blake Mykowski, the founder of Tom's Shoes, and Ben Goldhurst, the editor-in-chief of Good Magazine there. But for the gift guide every year, since Cool Hunting has one of the most coveted online gift guides, they come and they work with us. And then that happened. And so I had showed Whoopi the video of the store, and she's like, oh my God, that's so cool. Can I come and sit on the panel? And I'm like, let me think about it, yes. And so I didn't tell anyone who was coming to pitch that she was there, and this could have gone like horribly wrong, for the record. And when people submit for a product, I truly don't see one single product or anything before that night, and no one's pre-qualified or anything. And so it was a great experiment, right? Because if like this democratizing access and discovery, you know, in the truest form, right? If you have celebrities like Zach Braff or whomever on Kickstarter funding projects right next to a 16-year-old or a 40-year-old or a man or a woman, like that's in essence the same thing, right? But Zach Braff can't go have lunch with everyone who's on Kickstarter with him. And so one of the things that you might have noticed, and the reason why I wanted to show the video, which I've never shown in public before, is the idea that it's your story and it's not a spectator sport. And so people come and pitch one by one. So you show up, you get a beer, you get water if you're underage, and you meet everyone else. And one of the things that just happened, I actually probably should have put the picture in there, but is we started seeing posts from people who've met at pitch night, and then they've gone off to collaborate. And we have no idea until they like tag us on Instagram, and they're like, hey, we met at pitch night, and now look at this like collaboration we did. And so it's really about creating community while simultaneously making discovery a part of it, and one by one people pitch. And so the night Whoopi came, I told the Beth Mockery story. It happened. And I said, by the way, Whoopi's gonna walk in the door, and there's one rule, and that is don't take pictures. And because it's not about Whoopi, and she's a person like us. And like my dad said when I was 16 years old, you know, the president takes a shower and gets dressed the same way we do, and she's a person, she just has a different job, and we know who she is. And what was the most remarkable thing that happened that night is no one acted any differently for any one of those 48 pitches than any other pitch night. And Whoopi was there until the bitter end and loved every waking second of it. And so it's one little data point, but it's one that I'm very proud of. So back to this kind of idea of audience, right? I talked a lot about, you know, looking at wide ranges of demographics and how you connect with people on different levels. But it's also looking at who your market is, right? And most of us in the room, right, sell products to people and market to people. And so, you know, we think of trade shows as being one thing, we think of press releases as being one thing, we think of our consumer experience as being one thing. But when you're going on that meeting or setting that floor display, what if you stop and you think about, okay, how can I appeal to all three of those? And not in place of any of those things, but to augment that conversation. We did a style and technology story in September with Intel. And Jesse from Lumi actually was one of the brands that we had there as well. But what was super cool is, you know, this is a connected wearable watch, and everyone's talking about wearables. And it's called Withings Activité, and we were the first store to have it. And so I put it in the store. And then the LA Times stumbled into the store and happened to include it in a review of that unknown product called the iWatch, and said, you know, Apple should take cues from design like this beautiful watch that was discovered at Story. And so people dream of press placements like this, paying PR firms lots of money, and I'm not saying not to pay PR firms, but I'm just saying that one of the ways he was able to understand what Withings does and who they are is because we had a bio in the store that had their social media information, product detail, brand detail. We had a video showing the product. So he got a living press release that left an impression that then impacted his content. And then lastly, this idea of the store as a showroom, right? This is Will Berman. He is now the ripe old age of 17 years old. He is passionate about raw Japanese denim. And his mom was a customer in the store, heard about Pitch Night, and he came to show us his products. And so that's Will. And then he got an email from one of the hottest concept shops in London saying, I discovered your product at Story and was wondering if we could sell it at our shop in London. So now you have Will fulfilling a purchase order out of his bedroom, in between doing his homework, hand stitching some amazing product, and then that's it on the floor of the store in London. His, version of a rock star is this gentleman here, Scott Morrison, who has a denim atelier and retail brand called 3x1 Denim. And so I introduced him to Scott so he could meet him, and Scott thought he was great, but fell in love with his product. And so now he's selling his product to Scott's store in New York as well, and I'm proud to say has even gotten reorders, which we know is important. And I also think that discovery doesn't need to just be about a thing, right? It can be about ideas. It can be about technology. I think when I think of retail, often historically, it's not an industry known for like doing ring around the rosy together in terms of competitive brands, and for many reasons it shouldn't necessarily be. But I also think, there's a quote, collaboration's the new competition. And I think in some forms, when appropriate, thinking through that more can come from it. And so, Nordstrom ended up discovering Perch in Story and then ended up putting it in their stores. And this is Martha discovering product in Story. And I never talk publicly about celebrities. These are two cases of people who came into our doors and they wanted to become a part of our community, right? As much as this 16-year-old or Beth Mockery or Arthur from London. And, she literally showed up at the store one morning. She said, I heard about what you're doing. She found a bunch of products she loved. She didn't even tell me she was selling it online. And I only knew this because this was an exclusive product we had made from Story. And so then it was on her website. But that's just really exciting to me, is that it's really democratizing in a legitimate way when he got a kid in his bedroom and then you have someone who's relatively well known. So now we have a lot of time for questions. I love questions. You can ask me absolutely anything. So thank you, and let's rock and roll. Who's going to be?
Hi, my name is Stephanie Garrison. I'm a designer section member. Can you talk about who your sponsors have been and what general categories they've reached, and talk a bit about the sponsorship aspect?
Yeah, sure. So sponsors have ranged from, let's see, HP, GE, P&G, American Express, Liz, let me know if I forget any, Target, Intel, Details Magazine. We've worked also with smaller companies as sponsors, Flint and Tinder, Birchbox, Quirky. And so as it relates to that, it was a combination of both looking at the revenue side and the business model and thinking, what's a way that's relevant to what we want to do, but also, again, if people are paying for accessing consumers with TV ads, with outdoor advertisings, and you look at the amount of time people do spend in retail spaces, why can't that be a media channel? And to me, if you're doing it in an authentic way, I mean, to be honest with you, I'm sometimes petrified. I mean, think about it. I'm putting Gillette's logo, like, in my window of my store in New York City on 10th Avenue, which is a relatively hip neighborhood. So I'm thinking people are going to come in and be like, oh, you sell out or this or that. And there literally has never been, I need to knock on wood or something, but there's never been one comment about that. But I think it's for one reason and one reason only. And it's because it's contextually relevant to the conversation. They are adding value. I'd rather someone who started, the oldest men's grooming brand, authenticate a hot towel shave experience than me as like a concept shop crazy retailer, saying, yeah, trust me and let me give you a hot towel shave. Does that answer your question? Yeah? Or if you want to...
Rachel,
Yeah.
there's a question over here.
Okay, I can't see. Okay.
Hi, Rachel. This is Dave.
Hi.
Would you think of opening a store on the West Coast?
I'm dying to open up a store in LA. Yeah, so here's the deal. So creativity, ideas, not my problem. Operations, don't love it. It's taking me 3 years to understand it. And so that's the honest answer. So I become incredibly focused on operationalizing what we do so that when we do open up another store, which I hope we will, I'd like to do it this year. My sister runs operations. She has a borderline like seizure and coronary attack whenever I say that. But that's a very long-winded answer, and the answer is yes. I want it.
Okay, this will be our last question.
What are some of the challenges you experienced transitioning out of one story and into the next?
That's a good question. So we closed down in between stories. We shut down the store. For the shortest time we've done it, I think is like 5 or 6 days. The longest time, most recently, was 3 weeks, which I'd never like to do again. That was a long period of time. So we mitigate some of those challenges because the store is done, right? And it's also learning, leading, and doing, right? Because the model hasn't been done before. So in terms of what we've learned, I think I'd rather have more time than less time. And, a lot of it becomes resources. I own the company. I self-funded the company from my consulting business and the sponsorship model. And so we give ourselves more time so that there is room for mistakes. Although lately I have also learned the lesson is I'd rather pay more money for people who, know how to build certain things, or maybe instead of my team spending 3 days figuring out how to put some IKEA shelves together, it might be better to find someone who's really good at putting IKEA shelves together. But yeah, does that answer it? So I'd love answering questions, so I know we're done with time, but I will hang around over here after. If people do have questions, I'm happy to answer them, and then I'm going to walk the floor a bit, so I hope to meet you guys. And thank you for having me. I love being here.
Grab somebody sexy, tell them, hey, everything tonight.
Thank you, Rachel. Ladies and gentlemen, the show floor will be opening in 10 minutes. Please make your way downstairs. Hope you have a great show. Thank you for being here this morning.